Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Katie Britt of Alabama have introduced the IVF Protection Act now, which acts as a requirement the states do not prohibit IVF services. Unfortunately, this bill misses the mark behind the concerns over IVF, at least according to my next guest. But here's Mike Johnson addressing the bill first. Listen.
Kelly and I have many close friends who have had trouble with fertility issues, and they've had beautiful families as a result of IVF. And so it needs to be readily available. It needs to be something that every American supports, and it needs to be handled in an ethical manner. So we'll continue to support that. I don't think there's a single person in the Republican conference who disagrees with that statement, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, but it's something I think we ought to support.
All right. Well, is that addressing the ethical concerns that some people have about this or not? How it should be used as a topic of debate? That's the question. There's an estimate of 4.1 million embryos created each year in a lab, with only 3 to 7% resulting in the live birth of a child. Unwanted embryos destroyed, discarded, donated, or frozen indefinitely. Louisiana received lots of attention when the state decided to ban the destruction of unwanted embryos, and Colorado also created boundaries by prohibiting anonymous egg and sperm donation. This bill says nothing about states creating ethical laws around IVF, like banning embryo selection based on genetic makeup like eye color or sex, and doesn't address the concerns that many people have with this procedure. Join me now, though, to discuss is Emma Waters. Emma, thank you for being here. Break it down for me. In vitro fertilization seems like something that's gone on for a lot of years. It does create families for many people. Why the controversy?
Right. This is a fantastic question. So at the most basic level, in vitro fertilization involves the fertilization of egg with sperm in a petri dish in a lab. At that point, once the embryos are created, they can then be moved into the woman in hopes of conceiving a pregnancy. Now, Senator Cruz and Senator Katie Britt are correct that no state wants to prohibit IVF. Not a single state lawmaker, or federal lawmaker has ever expressed interest to this end. But with their bill, which is a very simple 3-page bill, says that if any state tries to prohibit IVF, they will lose access to their Medicaid funding. But the primary problem with this bill is that it actually focuses on boosting big fertility, which is a multi-billion-dollar global industry, at the expense of providing good regulations to parents who are suffering from infertility. Now, the phrase prohibits IVF seems really straightforward until you ask, well, what does it actually mean to prohibit IVF? The bill does not offer any definitions nor any clarifications about the limits or intent behind it. And indeed, Senator Cruz's office has gone so far as to say that they'll leave it up to lawmakers or the courts to define what counts as prohibiting. Now, I don't know about you, but given everything happening with President Trump alone, the last thing I want to do is leave it up to the courts to decide the limits or extent of a bill dealing with something so important as the creation of life. So the main concerns here then come down to this word prohibit. So for example, what if a state wanted to limit IVF to married couples using the IRS tax code? Or what if a state wanted to limit the access that foreign nationals have to IVF services if those foreign nationals are trying to create anchor babies in the United States?
Well, let me ask you this then, Emma. Let me jump in there. You've highlighted some of the concerns that you have with this and the Heritage Foundation has with this. How would you solve this problem? What is your solution?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And this is where it comes down to first regulating big fertility. So the fertility industry is a self-regulated industry. Only one federal regulation governs the practice of in vitro fertilization, and that only deals with the success rates. And so instead, what I would like to see and what the Heritage Foundation would like to see are strong regulations that protect parents and children. So some of the proposals that we've outlined include things like using the American Society for Reproductive Medicine's recommended guidelines of only transferring one embryo at a time and making that into law. Or, for example, Germany limits the total number of embryos that it creates at one time to ensure that we're not creating a surplus of human life just to test and select and destroy leftover or unwanted embryos. So you're
all right, fair enough, but let me ask you this, because you're looking at Ted Cruz here, one of the most conservative members of the U.S. Senate, Katie Britt the same. If you can't get a bill that you like from these two, how are you going to get a bill that you like? And furthermore, you're going to have people that say, well, wait a second. This is a free market deciding what parents want. Why would government get involved with this and interfere with their free practice? a free enterprise.
Right. Free enterprise is something that we really support, right? And we are all about entrepreneurial jobs and businesses making money and doing well for themselves. However, every single industry has regulations in place to ensure that the people participating in it have the proper protections. The case in Alabama that you referenced at the beginning, these were parents who had undergone IVF, but because of the lack of good regulations, ensuring that the fertility industry securely locked their doors and kept outside patients from wandering in, they lost all of the embryos that they created. And yet they couldn't even hold the fertility clinic accountable because no laws in place allowed them to do so. This is the same basic expectations we have for the fast food industry. If you hurt people, you're held accountable, and you should have strong standards in place that govern the practice from the medical and ethical perspective to ensure that.
Let me ask you this before we go. Let me ask you this because we're a little tight on time here, and I want to make sure I get this in. Where is this bill going? Will this bill get bipartisan support? Will this bill put forth by Cruz and Katie Britt, will it make it to the president's desk, do you think? Real quick, last thought.
So it seems unlikely. The American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the largest fertility organization, has openly said it will oppose the Cruz Britt bill, which is a huge mark against it. It seems unlikely that they'll have bipartisan support since Tammy Duckworth has another IVF bill that is far worse that she's pushing. And finally, only 2 Republicans have co-sponsored so far, and many have the same federalism concerns that I have when it comes to the use of prohibition and the incorrect nature of the bill. And so it seems that this is going to serve its purpose, helping Cruz and Britt have something referenced showing that they are pro-IVF and support families, but doesn't seem like it will progress too much further.
All right. Emma Waters from the Heritage Foundation, thank you for taking the time and explaining your point of view. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.